Welcome to the show. I'm Mike.
I'm Maggie.
And we're Friends on Fire.
So we are on a mission to get friends to talk about money.
So Maggie, I feel like the show's going pretty well. We have a number of episodes under our belt. We have our first interview. How are you feeling?
Feeling good about it.
This has been really fun.
Yeah, we've had a couple of phone calls come in.
Yep, and we have another one, which I'm interested to hear.
So we're going to play one question for you now and try to give it an answer. Here we go.
Hey, Maggie and Mike. My question for you two is for those people who are earlier in their career and can't max out all of their 401ks and other accounts, how do you suggest balancing saving away for retirement but also wanting to do some of the milestones that come with life, such as buying a house, saving for kids, setting up college funds, all of those things? Would love your thoughts. Thanks.
So that was a really great question. And it's something that I certainly I struggle with personally, and also struggle with other bloggers, because like as people progress through their life, they sort of forget what it was like at different times. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, if I were to back up and think about how I was when I was earlier in my career and making less money, like I really was approaching all this stuff differently. And so I think this is a great question. Perfect opportunity for us to impart some wisdom, hopefully. We'll see how wise it is.
Are you going to answer the question, or are you just going to say you think it's a great question?
I mean, I was trying to set you up to jump in with your advice.
I got some thoughts. You know, I got some thoughts on this. So I think it's a great question, great point. And my biggest general answer, without knowing all the details of your specific financial situation, would be to challenge yourself to think if that's really a true statement, that you can't max out your 401k. You may not be able to at this point, but I do think many people, based on other choices they're making in their life, think they can't, but they actually potentially could. And then I would also say B, I don't know why I label things with like A's and B's, because I'm always going to lose count of what I'm talking about. But the other thing would be, I think there's opportunities to, control the two levers you can control to be able to max out things like retirement. And the two levers you can control are how much you're spending on things, which is, again, where I think people should be a little bit more challenging. The second one would be how much you're making. So not necessarily saying you're going to magically make more income tomorrow, but really thinking, do you have other ways that you're getting income? There's a lot of people that do, what is it called? Like
side hustles?
Well, no, I wasn't even talking about side hustles, but like room hacking, or like they'll get a roommate. They'll go buy a house. They'll have a roommate. I even know people that are married and have a roommate, right? And that have a extra room that they Airbnb out or something like that. So I say that as in there might be some, I guess you could put that in the category of side hustles. There might be people who could make some extra income in addition to your regular job in order to better be able to maximize things like retirement early, because it's so much more critical for you to maximize those things at a younger age than it is even as you get older, because of the whole concept of compounding interest. It's
something that you need to address now and really wrap your head around it. So I would suggest kind of taking a step back. And you're probably looking at what your take-home pay is and what you're contributing to your 401k, and knowing that the max the IRS allows you to contribute in 2020 is $19,500. You're saying, I can't possibly do that much. But
10 times 2 would be you each doing that. So close to 40 grand.
So that would be the maxing out the 401k. But remember, this money's going in pre-tax. You're not reducing your take-home pay by that much. So it's probably a little bit easier than you might think, because you're saving on the taxes. If you look at what your total income is, and then take away your goals of $19,500 for 401k and maybe $6,000 for your Roth contribution, an HSA if you have one, and then look at that new starting point saying, can I possibly live on this amount of money? What lifestyle choices do I have to make? That's the way you should approach it, versus how am I doing right now? And what is it going to take to adjust it? Just start from scratch. Look at it from a clean slate.
I think another cool tip to think about, just for the point in this person's question that it sounds like they may be at, is I've heard a lot of people talk about trying to live off of one person's salary. If you think about that and really try to challenge yourself to do that, you probably could max out some of these accounts. Because again, I'm just doing some rough math, but chances are your partner makes $40,000 a year. And so if you just, I'm going to overly simplify this, but if you both make $40,000 a year, you both max out your 401k, you just, roughly cut your salary in half, you still collectively have about $40,000. And two people can live off $40,000 a year. It's not easy. It may not be quite as extreme as you want to go. But I think it's more of, not even striving necessarily for perfection there, but just thinking, where can you make some trade-offs, and where can you try to do more, and thinking about, where is your money going? How could you put more towards it?
And if the objective is buy a house, have kids, like it is not a bad thing to delay those decisions. Saving up enough that you can prepare for retirement and get a great deal on your mortgage by putting the right amount down. Having enough in savings so that you can adequately care for a child, which is very expensive. We're going to cover that on an upcoming episode. It is okay to wait a little bit. I think people want to jump into this, and they want to jump into house buying in particular because they feel like renting is a waste of money.
Or you're supposed to buy a house.
Yeah, it is definitely not a waste of money. It is financially better in many cases to keep renting versus pouring money into a house. So don't feel like you're missing any opportunities. Like really focus on taking advantage of all the opportunities available to you as far as savings, and then prepare for all of these life milestones.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. So one of those lifestyle choices that you were just talking about, Mike, is actually what kind of car you drive. So it's a good segue into our show topic today.
Yeah, we're titling this episode, Cars Are the Worst.
You titled the episode that. I'm not sure I've signed off on that title, but...
And I'm talking about it from a financial perspective. And so I think it'll be interesting to hear your perspective on this, because I look at things from a very numbers perspective. And there are very few things that are as poor of an investment as an automobile. Doesn't mean that you can't be happy with it. Doesn't mean that it doesn't serve value in your life. From a dollars and cents perspective, they're really harmful.
Okay, I'm curious to dig into how cars are harmful and why cars are the worst, as you say.
So kind of an interesting backstory in case you're wondering, like, well, Mike's never owned a nice car. He doesn't know what he's talking about, blah, blah, blah. So my grandfather rose through the ranks of the Ford Motor Company, became the chief executive of HR, and reported to Henry Ford, and would live the corporate lifestyle when Ford was one of the top 3 biggest companies in the world. And he had 5 kids, and he and his wife and his 5 kids every 6 months got a brand new car for free. And they would have free maintenance, and they'd just drop it off at the executive garage and be taken care of. And so my dad grew up
with fancy Ford cars.
Fancy cars, and it was Ford, Lincoln, whatever he wanted. Every 6 months they got a new car. And the interesting thing was, he and his siblings didn't develop a love affair with automobiles. They do not care about cars at all. And even
sometimes happens the opposite.
Yeah. And so my dad, he would be given a car. So this was after he left the house. He'd be given a car, and then he wouldn't even accept a new one. He'd be like, no, I'm good. And then he'd drive it until it would fall apart. And his dad refused to let him park at the house because he was embarrassed having this rundown Ford parked in front of this, executive's house. I'm going to
start asking you to park a few houses down from
That's
my house.
Totally fair. Did you see what I did today? I parked in front of your neighbor's house because I missed yours coming around the corner. So my dad never developed, an interest in cars. I think he saw them for what they are, utility, and that was certainly passed on to me. So it doesn't, how you grew up identifying with cars, not necessarily how you are going to live your life.
Okay, so before we dig into some of our thoughts on cars, in full disclosure, I thought it'd be fun if we actually share what kind of cars we drive, and just sort of the details of our car situations, because in the spirit of Friends on Fire, we want to have honest discussions with friends about money-related topics. So I'm rocking my husband, is driving a 2010 Prius, and then I am driving a 2016 Prius. I think technically it's a Prius V. Both are fully...
The V stands for what?
I don't know. It just means it's a little bit longer. It's the hatchback longer version. We got 3 kids. We need a little more room in one of them.
Okay.
But both, I think it might just be called the Prius 5. I'm not sure. Anyways, cut this out. Both of them are fully paid for, and we love them. And
I, as we've discussed, I think on every episode now, drive a 2003 Ford Explorer, which...
he didn't say 2013. He said 2003.
2003, 2-wheel drive, cloth interior, cassette tape player. also has a CD player. And yeah, we own it. It was paid for in cash.
Of course you own that. I hope you're not like making payments on that thing.
Yeah, they don't have loans that long. And then my wife drives a 2014 Ford Edge, which we paid cash for and don't owe anything on it.
Nice.
Again, 2-wheel drive, cloth interior, no extras.
A 2-wheel drive is just a regular car, right?
Right, but
Okay.
it's, the Explorer is an SUV, Edge is a crossover. I think some of those are 4-wheel drive.
Oh, okay.
We did not buy that extra.
Okay, got it.
So the reason I think cars are the worst is that they are just so expensive to own and operate, and there's very little difference in their functionality. It is like a marketer's dream because there are so many ways to position cars to allow you to purchase cars. The things that you end up having to pay for on the side, like repairs or cleaning or extras, it's a way for you to be separated from your money, but to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars. These are not little purchases. And so when you look at just the financial impact of owning a car, any car, let alone an expensive car, it can be extremely detrimental. And so going back to our earlier question from the caller, depending on how much they're spending to lease a car or finance a car, how much they're spending on insurance. I mean, this could be a reason why they can't max out some of their savings tools. And it's a very easy fix. Just buy a cheaper car.
So can you dig a little bit more into, just from a financial standpoint, why you think it's such a, I don't want to say bad decision, but why cars are the worst? Like,
cars are, people always, refer to cars as investments, but you would never, invest in the stock market knowing that the next day it would be worth 10% less and never have that value recover. An investment is something that presumably can grow over time, and cars depreciate over time. Like, their value does not come back unless there's some collector's market for it. If you go and buy a $50,000 car, the minute you drive off the lot, it's worth $40,000. And if you're looking at this from a net worth perspective, $10,000 has just evaporated. If you try to turn around and sell that car, you paid $50,000 in cash, in theory, and now it's only worth $40,000. So the depreciation of it is one reason why cars are the worst. You lose money. The second is that the way most people buy them is very costly. Not a lot of people go and pay cash for their cars because it's hard to come up with even $15,000 in cash, let alone $25,000 or $50,000 or $100,000, depending on what kind of car you're buying. So people lease or finance them.
Is it fair to say leasing is 100% always a bad idea?
That's a really good question.
I've always thought it was and sort of been told it was.
Financially speaking, from a cost perspective, yes. Leasing means that you never own the car. So you pay for the privilege of never owning the asset.
Kind of like renting the car.
Yeah, you're kind of renting it. You're also paying for the privilege to borrow the money because somebody has to be paid. The manufacturer has to be paid for that car. If your lifestyle is such that being free of owning that asset, meaning you don't have to like sell it again, it's not on your books, quote unquote, and you don't have to give up the amount of cash needed to go buy it, there could be some benefit to that. But you have to be aware, like, you are paying for that benefit. It costs you money. Yeah, you're paying a premium for it. So I don't want to say definitively that it's always the worst idea, but if
would you ever lease a car?
I might lease a very cheap car if for like a period of time I didn't want to own it, like to bridge a time period.
Or if there's been some really interesting deals. Like I remember when the Nissan Leafs came out, there were some leases where like literally between that and the tax credit, you were like getting a car for free for 2 years.
Yeah, that was actually...
That would be a situation where you're almost like hacking a system.
In a previous job, a bunch of people on my team did that because it was like $50 a month to lease a car, which is the cheapest way you can own and operate a car. So that particular deal, because there was a credit from the government.
Tax credit situation.
So leasing is one way people acquire cars. The other is financing, which means like you're borrowing the cash and paying interest on it. And depending on how much interest you're paying and how long your term is, it's like a mortgage. You will, if your car is $50,000, you're going to spend $60,000 to go acquire it with all the costs of these interest payments. And by the way, you just drove off a lot and your car is worth $40,000. So you're on the hook for $60,000. Your car is worth $40,000. that $20,000 has just evaporated. It exists nowhere. And so when you look at how much it costs you to go buy a car, like it should put into perspective how serious of a purchase decision this is.
One thing that I thought was cool in the movie, in the documentary Playing with Fire, was Scott's wife. I can't remember her name for the life of me now, but she did not want to get rid of her car, and she had a nice BMW and felt like, she worked hard for it and deserved a nice car. I could totally empathize with her, but she really didn't want to get rid of it. And she kind of eventually came around to it for many reasons. And I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I'll try. She sort of came around to it when someone, I think it was a mad scientist or somebody, was showing her the math of how much longer she would need to keep working to continue to own that car. And so as soon as that clicked with her, she was finally came around to okay, I could drive a different car because I don't want to have that many more years tacked on to how much I'm working. And so I think there's a lot of day-to-day purchases where you could constantly put that math against, am I going to, buy this thing? But a car is one of the few bigger regular purchases somebody might make that you could put some really meaningful math against. How are you willing to work another extra couple years to own a car like that? And maybe you are, but it's a good question to ask yourself.
It's a very interesting point because if you frame up the car expense in terms of financial freedom, I think it puts it into perspective. And marketers are really great at convincing you that somehow you're not paying a lot for these vehicles. So you might see some beautiful luxury car ad where it's $500 a month. And you're like, I save much more than $500 a month. This is no problem. I can afford this. But what you don't realize is that you also have to do, let's say, $6,000, down payment on that lease. And then you have a 3-year lease. So you combine these, and now all of a sudden you're paying $6,000 a year for 3 years, plus the down payment. You've paid $24,000 to own a car for 3 years, which means that that's $8,000 a year to just drive this car. That's so much money.
Yeah.
And you should be, or could be, in $1,000 or $2,000 a year to own a car. If you look at the cost of a car and then think about what could that $8,000 a year be turned into if you were to invest it or put it towards your 401k if you're not doing, the long-term impact of this is huge.
Yeah. Different math on that, but take that $8,000 a year, and if I were to spend that every year on a car, but keep my car for 10 years, I'd have an $80,000 budget for my car.
Yeah,
it's good math there. Okay, one other thing that I was thinking about tied to cars is just the idea that nice cars make me nervous. So I was driving in the parking deck the other day at work, and there was a Maserati in front of me, and I don't really know what a nicer car costs for a lot of types of cars. And I was just curious because it was, very fancy looking. And so I Googled Maserati and what the starting price is. And it was $107,000 was the MSRP for a Maserati, a new Maserati.
That's a lot of money.
And I was like, I had no idea a car could cost that much. I mean, I knew it existed, but not in my day-to-day world, not out in Hollywood or somewhere. And I was just thinking I would be so nervous driving that around. A, I could build 1 or 2 tiny houses for that much money to live in. B, I'd constantly be worried that someone's going to scratch it or nick it, or, just someone's going to park too close to me, or, it just feels like a lot of money to be driving around with. Anyways, my point was nice cars make me nervous.
Yeah. And I think that applies to a lot of nice things. I think everybody knows somebody who bought something and just doesn't really use it in their life because they're afraid of getting it dirty or afraid of getting it damaged. If you're driving around a $100,000 car, I personally would be freaked out all the time that it was going to be a target for somebody to break into, that if it got scratched, I'd have to go repair it. Yeah. The benefit of driving a 2003 Ford Explorer that hasn't been washed in 15 years is that dings, dents. Yeah, I mean, if somebody rear-ended me and the whole back was messed up, I wouldn't do anything. I'm not sure you'd even notice it. Yeah, as long as it kept driving. And so the cheaper your vehicle is, the less you care about it, the less you need to put more money into it to keep it looking nice.
Yeah. I will say, in full disclosure, I really want to own a Tesla someday.
But why?
Because I love the idea of a fully electric car, and it's one of the nicer ones that's out there. And so it just would make me happy to own. It doesn't have to be, maybe they'll eventually make other brands that I think are better than some of the other current electric cars that are fully electric cars that are out there.
So there's like a coal burning plant in Georgia that's feeding the electricity to charge that car, right? Okay. Does that make you feel any less bad? You're ruining my electric
dream. I know we joke about Mike's 2003 Ford Explorer a lot, but I think one thing that actually is an important note to make is I don't even know how to say this in a nice way, Mike. I don't want to drive a 2003 Ford Explorer. I have a lot of similar views about cars as you do.
I feel like you're going to hurt my feelings right
sorry.
now.
No,
continue your thought.
I can only see your eyes above the mic, so I can't tell your full facial expression, but you look sad.
The tears are welling up. Just be gentle.
I can see the tears rolling down your face. So my point is there's extremes on everything, right? Like you eventually, that car will die and then you'll have a newer car that you'll then drive for another 10 to 15 years, right? Or 20 years.
Yes, that's exactly right.
But the point is, I think you can still value, I think there's just levels of how much you value a car and quality of life and some other things. Like I really enjoy my 2016 Prius. It has heated seats. It has some nice, like, do you know what heated seats are?
Yeah.
You know, cars come with that now?
Yeah.
But it comes, it has some nice features that I wouldn't get in a car that was, 10 years older. So I say that as in, I think there's sometimes some kind of middle ground, but also I can afford that 2016 Prius and I paid cash for it and I, saved for it before I purchased it and I'm not financing it. And so I think there's a lot of rules that we can get into on kind of what you should do or what we would recommend doing tied to cars that is a more, financially advantageous way to think about your cars.
Yeah, that's a great point of clarification. I don't recommend anybody go out and buy a 17-year-old car. Go buy a fairly recent, good-shaped car and then drive it for 17 years.
Yeah.
And I also kind of like, it's sort of a badge of honor for me because, there isn't any car that's shittier than mine in the parking lot. And I'm sort of proud of that.
Yeah, no, I feel that way about many things. Okay, so what should people do instead as they think about cars? I like your first rule, Mike.
Remind me what my first rule was.
Stop caring because nobody cares about your car.
Yeah. Even though you think people are looking at you and admiring your car, they're definitely not. People are so consumed with their own issues that they're not thinking, oh, he's really, he's made it, he's successful. Like, they do not care. And so if you can get over that and just drive something that kind of like you feel nice in and you're comfortable, then that's the biggest hurdle. And you'll find that there isn't a big difference between a $100,000 car and a $20,000 car.
Yeah, I totally agree. But this is my point around my point about the Prius that I drive as an example is I don't drive that because I think someone cares about it. I drive it because for me, it's a comfortable car. It is aligned with my own values of wanting to be more environmentally conscious. If you're doing it for a reason that has value to your life and adds value to your life, that's an okay reason to have a car, especially if you can afford it, which we'll get into a little bit more in a second. But one thing, Mike, just on your comment about nobody cares about what you're driving, there's a really funny thing I saw on Instagram yesterday from the Accidental Fire Instagram handle, and it was a sort of image or infographic that someone had drawn up that says what you think people are thinking, or it says, driving around in your wealth draining Mercedes, what you think people are thinking versus what people are actually thinking. And the what you think people are thinking is like, he's rich, he must be accomplished, he's sexy, he's made it, he's discerning. And the what people are actually thinking is like, it's green, just effing go. Back off, you tailgating. I can't say some of these words on the air. Seriously, how about a blinker, you a-hole? Get the F out of my way. They got a lot of curse words in there. But anyways, it was really funny because it's Mike's point of like, nobody cares what you drive as much as you might think people do. So if you have a nicer car because it's important to you, that's one thing. But if you're doing it because you're trying to, keep up with the Joneses per se, reconsider that.
Yeah. And if it is important to you, like really be honest with yourself. Why is it important to you? And you might have valid reasons. You might really love cars. Like I have a friend who genuinely loves driving cars, that it's his passion in life. And he owns a nice car and it makes him really happy. And he doesn't care what people think, but he has an expensive car.
Yeah, good for him.
So once you get over the fact that like nobody cares about what you're driving, then it's how do you make the best financial decision? And I think we'd agree that if you have the ability to just pay cash for it, buy something a modest car that's used with low mileage, pay cash for it, and you get out of all the traps of financing and leasing and all these other things that cost money.
Okay. I'm gonna sort of butcher this a little bit, but there's a lot of different schools of thought we'll get into on how much you should spend on a car. We'll share a couple of ones and our thoughts on them. One of them is Dave Ramsey's rule, and he's made a couple of statements around kind of cars. One of them is that your car should never be worth more than half of your annual income.
And this is crazy to me, that half your income is the value of your car.
Well, I think he's like, his example that he gave in one was like, if you make $50,000 a year, you shouldn't drive a $40,000 car, which I appreciate. But
then on the other extreme,
you could have
like
a $25,000 car, which is a lot.
If you make $100,000, a $50,000 car is more car than you need.
Yeah. Or if you make
$500,000,
$200,000, you could have a Maserati.
Yeah. Or if you make $500,000, I don't even know what car you would buy.
3 Maseratis, 2.5 Maseratis.
Oh, you can buy multiple cars. So there's another interesting rule that I really like from the Financial Samurai, who's a blogger that I've been following for a long time. And his rule is that you should only spend 10% of your annual income on a car, and you should pay cash. So if you make $100,000, the most car you could buy would be $10,000. You'd have to go buy a cheap car, it would be used, and that's it. And this one I actually sort of subscribe to. And a lot of people would say, well, I make $60,000 a year. I can't find any car that's $6,000 that could actually take me to work. And
could get a 2003 Ford Explorer for $6,000.
Right. There might be one on the market for anybody listening. Call and make your best offer. And so you might say, well, how could I possibly do that? The rule is too aggressive. And
it is a very aggressive
rule. It's extremely aggressive.
But I love the spirit of what they're trying to do.
And maybe the answer is, maybe you should try public transportation for a little while. You know, in Atlanta, we have MARTA that people don't really utilize that much. Really ask yourself, what could you do? How low could you go on your transportation expenses without ruining your life?
So one thought, like when you said people think, well, I could only have $6,000 to buy a car. I was looking at something yesterday. I was looking at something tied to car insurance, which we'll talk about later. But my husband's 2010 Prius is worth somewhere in the like $6,000 to $8,000 or $9,000, maybe $6,000 or $7,000.
That's like 4 2003 Ford Explorers.
Well, but my point is, like, his car is very reliable. It's in good shape. It still looks good. It is. Yes, it's 10 years old at this point. But it's got like many, many years left in it of reliable driving. And you could buy that car for $6,000 or $7,000. So
his car is also on the market. So if you'd like to call in and make an offer.
Yeah. But I know it is incredibly, I don't even know what the word is, but to some people, the same response that Scott's wife had in Playing with Fire, that thought is like shocking to people. Like they're like, I would never go buy, I make $60,000 a year. I would never go buy a $6,000 car, like that's beneath me or something. But our point is, we're trying to challenge you to really think about what's important in your life and maybe do some like crazy wild things, like go drive a less nice car for a few years to save some money. Again, you're making your own decisions and you're making your own kind of priorities and trade-offs of, what you want to do. But even tied to the beginning of this call, when we took the call about the 401k, that person, they could potentially consider driving a different car than they might drive today, and that would fund their 401k for the year.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a bold, big decision, but that's the sort of thing where those decisions can really pay off, especially if you make them earlier in life. So the other thing is, I looked up the thing I once saw that Dave Ramsey had posted on Instagram, the $1 million thing was, he said, don't buy a new car until you have at least $1 million net worth. His point was just what Mike was saying earlier about a new car starts losing value the day that you drive it off the lot. And he basically said, unless you have $1 million net worth, you don't need to invest that kind of money in an asset that depreciates. Until you've hit this financial milestone, an affordable and reliable used car is all you need. His other comment is only pay cash for cars, which I highly agree with. Ideally, you're saving up the money you need to buy your car before you have it and not financing it, which is another rule that would align well with the Financial Samurai rule also.
And this show has been brought to you by The Dave Ramsey Show.
We're just going to repeat Dave Ramsey's advice.
Yeah, just kind of read off his Instagram posts.
Nice.
All right, so let's give a quick recap. I think number 1, nobody cares what you drive. Number 2, be honest about your priorities with yourself and what you're trying to achieve. Buy something that's modest, preferably used. pay cash.
You did a great job summarizing that. I thought it was a great discussion on cars. We didn't actually talk about car insurance a lot today, but one of the points that you might have made briefly, Mike, is things that get more expensive with fancier cars are also car insurance.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of a confusing topic and probably something people are interested in.
Yeah, so we're going to do our whole next episode we'll do on car insurance to dig into that piece more. I know this is super exciting topics, guys. You're like, oh, a whole episode on car insurance.
Yeah,
Yay!
I can't
wait. So you've got that to look forward to. So before we wrap up, we will do our quick Mike's Minute on the Mic.
Actually, Maggie?
Yeah.
I'd like to switch it up. We're going to do Maggie's Minute on the Mic.
Okay.
It's going to have a surprise twist.
Okay.
All right, let me get my stopwatch.
I really have no idea what Mike's doing right now.
The question is, you have 60 seconds to answer.
I got to set my own timer.
How were you financially impacted by the recession in 2008? And what was your biggest learning?
Wow. I can't even remember 2008. I don't know that I even remember. I know I sold a house. My first house that we owned, we sold right around 2008, actually in early 2008. And we definitely did not make as much as we could or should have made, but we did sell it right before things got even worse. So things were kind of on the decline. So I'd say that was probably a good decision. I don't know if that was a good or bad decision. There's a reason I ask you these questions. Is your whole point just to show that I can't answer a question in 60 seconds?
Please answer the question, Maggie.
Okay. What was the question again?
You have 15 seconds.
I literally forgot the question. I don't really remember making a bad financial decision then. I should have invested a bunch of money then, because I'd have a lot more now.
You have 4 seconds.
I forgot the question.
All right, you're out of time. The twist on this was I was going to ask you what my question was, and you didn't even forget it at 60 seconds. You forgot it at 15 seconds.
Okay. Okay, let's get back to Mike's Minute on the Mic.
All right.
Because I think you do but I know my strengths and I know my sort of boundaries.
Asking questions is your strength.
Asking questions is better. I cannot answer any question in 60 seconds unless it's a yes or no question. And even that might get difficult. Okay, Mike's Minute on the Mic. So remember, I get to ask you a question. You got 60 seconds to answer it. You're good at this. I'm bad at this. We've just learned. Mike, when that 2003 Ford Explorer dies, which it will any minute now, what are you going to buy next?
I think I'm going to buy another Ford Explorer, probably a 2014. I'm going to buy it from Carvana because I bought our last car from them and I was super happy with the price and the whole experience. And I'm looking to spend about $18,000 to $21,000. Gray or black.
Okay.
That was easy.
Okay, nice. Good to know. You got, 30 seconds left if you just want to pontificate on why any of those things. Or we'll just keep moving. Okay, thanks. So we will wrap this show up and just remind people that we always love for anyone to give us a call and leave any comments, questions, tips, etc. And we will try to play them on the air. And when I say try, right now we're early on the show, so anybody that calls gets on the air. Let's be clear.
Right. There's not like a big waiting list.
Yeah, I know,
for these
right?
things.
Yep. I'm trying to get like my mom to call in to leave a question. Okay, 404-981-3370. Please give us a call.
And please leave us a review on iTunes, wherever you're listening to this podcast. It really helps other friends find our podcast when you leave your feedback.
Also, please subscribe to this podcast.
And you can find us at friendsonfire.org. If you
.org? I just like to say .org every time you say it.
I think if people are listening, I think it's really clear it's .org.
.org.
So friendsonfire.org. If you want to check out the latest episodes, sign up for email or get in touch with us.
Awesome. So great discussion. And next week we will talk about car insurance.
Oh, such a great topic.
I know. I can't wait. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Maggie.
Bye.
Bye.